Hi, my name is Mihn, and I will be talking about the usage of unrestricted media by children about age 16 and under, its consequences, and statistics to prove that it is better for it to be limited and supervised. Specifically, I want to discuss the dangers of media such as advertisement, television, movies, social networks, and social media that expose young adults to sexually explicit material which result in abnormal or bad behavior. Moreover, we have countless internet sites such as Tumblr that share media with friends or strangers to reiterate the fact that sexual content is easily accessed and become a potential threat to the well-being of a growing child and those around him or her. First, I would like to discuss the danger of social media in terms of sexually explicit material. Dr. Victor Strasberger of the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is a leading organization in advocating healthy growth in children, stated, "I guarantee you that if you have a 14-year-old boy and he has an internet connection in his bedroom, he is looking at pornography. But it doesn't have to be specifically pornography. We know most children won't actively seek out pornography because they are interested in other things. However, be connected with adults who can freely use the internet in any manner of uploading sexually explicit media. Children have a high probability of being exposed to such material on sites such as Tumblr. Tumblr is a unique blogging site which offers endless scrolling of pictures, gifs, and videos of pretty much anything. You can easily follow other bloggers, and what they share is shown on your very own homepage newsfeed. A recent study by Gary Tan shows a survey done for two different age groups of 13 through 18 and 19 through 25. He surveyed about 1,000 people, and it shows that Tumblr was the most popular out of choices from Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and other social networks. The age group of 13 through 18 had the most using Tumblr at a significant 62%. So in conjunction with the study, there are children that share the same small vicinity of media as people in their mid-20s and beyond. Similarly, they have access to the same TV channels. Tumblr has bloggers that post pornography with all sorts of tags to promote their page. You may search for something completely different than pornography and still end up with search results that have it. These children are only a few steps away from viewing such sexually explicit material. It's just that easy to get access to sexual content. But you're probably thinking, so what if they do? Carolyn Ross, a doctor of medicine and public health, explains that even the shortest exposure leaves a lasting impression. Early exposure to sexual content can lead to the following undesirable effects: early sex, high-risk sex, sex addictions, and sexual violence. Early sex is a result of media that provides the wrong kind of sex education for naive children. Movies, magazines, and advertisements that show what sex is, how it is done, and that it is normal to be experimental at a young age influences the behavior of children. Research done in psychological science found that the more exposed to sexual content, the earlier the teen has sex. Boys who were exposed to sexually explicit media were 3 times more likely to engage in oral sex or intercourse 2 years after exposure than non-exposed boys. Young girls exposed to sexual content in the media were twice as likely to engage in oral sex and 1.5 times more likely to have intercourse. Proportionally, the more engagements in early sex show that they are more likely to have frequent, unprotected sex, multiple partners, and use drugs or alcohol. A study by researcher Dr. Jennings Bryan showed that more than 66% of boys and 40% of girls reported wanting to try some of the sexual behaviors they saw in the media. This increases the risk of sexually transmitted diseases and unwanted pregnancies, placing financial burden to those around them. Early exposure to sexual content is a factor to sex addictions. Studies show that out of 932 sex addicts, 90% of men and 77% of women reported that pornography was a factor of their addiction. Having an early exposure can lead to constant urges for sexual material and eventually become a bad habit. As a disorder, sex addiction can only get worse as people want to achieve something equivalent or more satisfaction through something sexual. In extremes, sexual violence may occur. Early exposure to sexual content may increase the risk of a child becoming a victim of sexual violence or acting out sexually against another child. This can lead to a habitual desire for more violent material, rape, or even molestation. With easy access to pornography and media outlets such as Tumblr, one can imagine how a child's life can be affected because he or she wasn't supervised or limited. As you can see, the media has a lot of outlets to deliver sexually explicit materials, and it is really easy to access or even stumble upon it. Children around the age of 16 and under should have their share of the media limited and supervised in order to prevent these bad results that can happen from early exposure of sexual content.
It's actually I guess she has black hair. But it's just like you're like in Northern so I'm black. Yeah, I mean like you're tanner, I guess. There's all that white stuff. No, right? Exactly. That's a good one. I told you. Right? White Irish. Horrible. That was funny.
All right, Mihn, the opening of the speech sounds like it's an inventory of all kinds of issues that are being related to social media and potential problems that could come up. There's also an explanation about the social media that kids use. The exact proposition seems to be a little bit less certain than it ought to be. I got the impression that it was really about the dangers that are out there on social media, but as the speech develops, it's really focused primarily on exposure to sexual material and the access that the kids get through those media. So I think that you need a stronger and clearer statement of that proposition earlier in the speech. It sort of gets inferred in the opening section, but I don't think it's as clearly stated as it needs to be. The contents, I did hear a structure being set up at the beginning of the presentation, or I should say just a little bit into the presentation. So I did think that you started off with the idea of having a structure there. The follow-up, I think, is a little bit problematic. The controversy on this issue, I'm not exactly sure that there is a dispute that exposure is potentially problematic. You know, and I don't know that there's anybody except perverts out there who says, yeah, let's give the 14-year-olds all the access to the porn that they want. So, you know, the real question is whether or not there, like you said, there's something problematic about the social media that is inherently difficult. If there's an inadequate amount of parental control available for accessing these social media, maybe that's where your controversy. You guys have got to shut the hell up. I'm sorry, I'm a little impatient here. Sometimes a little chitter chatter between speeches is perfectly fine, but when your classmates are speaking or when I'm speaking, I really need to focus. I'm having a tough time concentrating, I'm focusing on this, and it is very distracting to me and to some of your classmates. So I don't mean to snap at people, but could you please refrain when people are talking from engaging in the side chatter? Thank you. All right, the structure of the speech I think is a little bit problematic because even though you started off with a signpost on the first point that was very clear, I didn't really catch any signposting on the secondary issues, the other secondary issues that you had. And the material seems to kind of run together. It's flowing smoothly. It's not that it doesn't make sense the way you're presenting it, but as I'm looking back at it, how that information all builds your argument is a little bit less clear than it should be. I did think that you had some lots of examples that you're presenting. There's a good place where you have a quote that you start off one of the sections with, but it wasn't clear to me that where the quote ended and when you began extending your inference on this particular point. And I think that happens in a couple of other places as well. So you need to have more distinctive citation of the evidence in your argument so that we know when we're listening to your inference based on the data that you're presenting and when it is just the data that is being presented. Like I said, there's some good statistical information in the presentation there as well. The delivery, I think you need to work a little bit on. There's generally not a lot of audience contact. There's a lot of reading that's going on. I thought, for example, it would make sense if we could see some data on STDs that were among young people. If there's a difference, for instance, between the rate of STDs among young people today than there was 15 or 20 years ago when those social media were not available, that would tend to support your notion that we're getting this increased exposure and they're having more sexual activity and the spread of those kinds of things. As it is, it sounds like it's somebody's theory on this. They're an authority. They've given us some reason to believe that it's true, and now I'm looking for the backup of their opinion, which is what you're using to make your argument, and it seems like there should be some other information that does that. All right, thank you.